In 1904, 32 people lined up to compete in the 1904 St. Louis Olympic Marathon. Of those 32 that competed, only 14 crossed the finish line, but only 13 crossed the finish line without getting disqualified. Of the 13 people that crossed the finish line without getting disqualified, we have a man that was chased off the path by dogs. We have a man that was on doses of strychnine to help him push through when he wanted to quit. And we have a man who came all the way from Cuba, who gambled away all his money in New Orleans and then had to hitchhike over 40 hours all the way to St. Louis, Missouri, where he barely made it to the start of the race. Now, before we hop into the clusterfucked events of the actual race, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a background. On July 1st in 1904, the third Summer Olympic Games officially kicked off. There was numerous events that were involved with this Olympic Games, but the one we're going to talk about is the marathon portion. Now, this course that they were running on, it wasn't your normal marathon course that you guys are probably imagining. It consisted of 5 laps around the main stadium that the Olympics was being held in, and then out onto the streets of St. Louis, Missouri, following this path that you guys see shown here. Now, this path, it might not look that challenging from a bird's-eye view, but this marathon path was littered with unpaved roads, tons of dust, chain-smoking spectators, wild dogs, pedestrians walking their dogs and going about their daily business, cars driving ahead of the contestants, kicking up all the dust into people's throats, multiple hills, and, if you can believe this, only 2 water stations due to the man that was in charge of the marathon event wanting to test the effects of extreme dehydration on athletes. All right, so originally there was supposed to be 32 people competing in this race, but 8 people straight up didn't show up, so they got DNSs, did not start. Anyway, we have 24 contestants. They're lined up on the line. A starting pistol goes off, and they start making their way along the course. Just a quick refresher, the course consists of 5 laps around the Olympic Stadium and then out onto the streets of St. Louis, Missouri. So after these contestants had made their 5 laps around the Olympic Stadium, they started to work their way out onto the streets of St. Louis, Missouri. And this is where the clusterfuck really begins. Now, at about the 10-mile mark, long-distance runner John Lorden became very, very ill and started puking for reasons unknown. So he ended up dropping out of the race. Not too long after that, long-distance runner Sam Meller ended up also dropping out of the race due to too many cars driving in front of him, kicking up way too much dust and him inhaling it. Now, he wasn't the only victim that the dust claimed that day. We have William Garcia, who ended up dropping out of the race after inhaling so much dust that it started to cause internal hemorrhaging in his stomach, ladies and gentlemen, aka homie swallowed so much sand his stomach was bleeding internally and about to burst, so he ends up dropping out of the race as well. Now, I'm gonna let you guys know right now, the order that I'm reading these in are not the order that it happened. This is the order that I just had it in when I was doing research, so just bear with me if it gets a little confusing. Now, let's talk about Mr. Fred Lors, the first person that crossed the finish line during the St. Louis Olympic Marathon in 1904. Mr. Lors crossed the finish line in a time of 3 hours and 13 minutes. However, he had some mechanical assistance. At about the 4th mile mark, he actually ended up dropping out of the race and not wanting to go on anymore. But then he saw a car passing by, and some reports say that he hitchhiked the ride from the car, but other reports say that he just jumped on the back of the car as the car headed back towards the stadium and passed by contestants and spectators, and he just waved to them and taunted them. The balls of this guy. The car broke down at about the 19th mile mark, so he still had 5 miles to go until he got back to the stadium. And it's at this point that he decided, you know what? I'm back in the race, baby. So he starts running and he crosses the finish line. But as he's about to receive the gold medal from Teddy Roosevelt's daughter, Alice Roosevelt, she was like the medalist award lady, spectators start calling out from the crowd that this guy is a fraud and that he cheated and blah, 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 blah. It was at that time that he admitted to the whole charade and then also tried to tell everyone, guys, it was just a joke. I was going to actually accept the award, whatever, whatever. So he ends up getting disqualified from ever competing in the Olympics again, and then goes on to win the Boston Marathon 1 year later in 1905. And I actually kind of want to look into that to see if there's any reports of him doing any sketchy stuff, but I'll have to get back to you guys on that on like a live stream or whatever. Now, at about the 10-mile mark, Mr. Thomas Hicks, the real winner of the marathon, was ahead of everyone by about 1.5 miles. Now, reports at the time say even though he was ahead by 1.5 miles, he was extremely fatigued and wanted to quit and lay down, and his trainers had to physically restrain him from doing so. They then ended up giving him several doses of strychnine, which is rat poison, but apparently in low doses, it acts as a nerve stimulant. Don't try that at home, okay? The strychnine was also accompanied by shots of brandy and several raw eggs. Now, this would give Mr. Hicks the mental fortitude to kind of keep pushing on. Now, I say kind of keep pushing on because reports at the time say that he was literally being carried by his trainers, and when he crossed the finish line, they were basically holding him in the air, and he was just kind of shuffling his feet. Also, after crossing the finish line, he ends up collapsing to the ground, and it took like 4 doctors about an hour to get him to feel good enough to be able to like leave the stadium. Now we're going to talk about Darion Carvajal, the postman from Cuba. Now this clusterfuck actually starts even before the race even started for him, because he had fundraised a bunch of money from local Cubans to be able to go to the St. Louis Olympics and compete in the marathon. However, he decided to gamble all of his money away in New Orleans. Then he ended up having to hitchhike about 40 hours from New Orleans all the way up to St. Louis and barely made it in time for the race. He actually showed up in dress shoes and trousers that he then cut into shorts so that he was able to run a little bit better. There's reports that during the race, he actually stole several peaches from people. That wasn't enough food for him, so he wandered off into an apple orchard where he ate some apples, but then became very, very ill and got a stomach ache and ended up taking a nap, waking up, and then still finishing 4th. And who could forget the Frenchman, Mr. Albert Corey, whose clusterfuck also starts before the race even begins. This gentleman came all the way from France to America to compete in the Olympics, but he had brought the wrong documentation. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine coming all the way from France and you bring the wrong documentation when you're trying to come and compete in the Olympics. Anyway, they ended up letting him compete. He actually did pretty decent. And that, guys, is the story of the biggest clusterfuck in sporting event history. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to let me know by dropping a comment down below, hitting that subscription button, and dropping a like on the video, guys. I'll see you on the next one. And I'm kind of working on my style. I'm trying to like read less of my notes, just kind of like improv this kind of. That was just like a little self-conscious thing that I felt like I had to throw out there. Anyway, you guys are lit. I appreciate you guys. Bon voyage, whatever people say on YouTube now in 2023. Yeah, slap your titties. I'm out.